The Rochester Church canceled this morning. Many or most of those folks had snow and ice outside of their homes this morning. I think they got it a little worse, a little farther north than we did. And so that allowed Shelley and I to be a little bit earlier, but I think that also kept a lot of people home. Either the roads were bad or people were fearful they were bad. And both can be something that keeps us at home. So we're a small group. It's a little, we could probably all do this on the first two rows if we wanted to, right? Everybody could scoot forward, all 20 of us, but that's okay. The beautiful thing about God is he's not necessarily worried about numbers. He says where two or three are gathered in his name. And he can bless in small or in large groups. He can work in small or in large groups. And it's good to be with you. Today's sermon is very simple. It's a simple, easy sermon. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. You are more valuable. What good are you? What value are you? What can you contribute? Or maybe you hear it as, what are you good for anyway? What do you bring to the table? My dad tells the story of a place where he would preach periodically, and a couple of times the pastor would ask him if he would preach when he wasn't going to be available, and my dad would have something else going on, and he'd say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available to preach that day. And he'd say, well, what good are you for anyway? You know what I mean? We're in a world where we're bombarded by messages about our value, our worth. Hold on.
We'll edit this out of the video.
Yeah, thank you. There we go. Look at that. Jared, I'm sorry, green and yellow are not two colors I can tell the difference between. I'm on now, right? Okay, thank you. It's green when I'm on and yellow when I'm on mute, and I actually can't tell the difference between the two of them. Please don't think that I'm not safe to drive a car. In bigger amounts I can see, and there's certain little tiny light that far away from me. It's hard for me to tell what that is. All right. We get things messed up on what we're valuable, how valuable we are. We get it messed up in several different ways today. I want to focus a little bit on that and then talk to you more importantly about how God gets that right in our lives. Let's pray. Our dear Father in heaven, thank you for everything you've given us. Lord, today I ask that you would use me as your servant, that this group gathered here would lose sight of me during this time and they would see you, that their eyes would be fastened firmly upon you and your plan and your way of doing things. Bless us, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen. Let's begin how we often get this wrong. And I would start with an illustration using chickens. Chickens and humans have a shared social pattern. We both develop what's called a pecking order. There is in chickens, there's what you might refer to as the boss chicken. And the boss chicken is in charge of everything that happens with all the chickens. And the most importantly, I think, for the boss chicken is that any other chicken that gets in the way of the boss chicken or acts in a way the boss chicken is not in favor of, they get a peck from the boss chicken. And there's a second chicken in charge, the second to boss chicken. And that second to boss chicken will peck any other chicken that does something wrong except for the boss chicken. And there's a third, and there's a fourth, and there's a fifth, and there's a sixth, until you get all the way down to the bottom, and there's this chicken that's in charge of absolutely nothing. They don't have anybody to boss around. They get nothing to do, nothing to say. The way that they get to eat is if everybody else has eaten. The way that they can get that little bug crawling through there is if nobody else notices it. Other than that, they don't get a whole lot. And sometimes, in extreme cases, that chicken that's at the bottom end of the pecking order can actually end up dead because they get hammered so much over and over and over and over again by the other chickens. Well, we do the same thing. We don't use our beaks, obviously, but we do the same thing. We build what's essentially a pecking order. We start in early childhood. It gets going full steam and often downright mean by the time we get into middle school and high school. It becomes formalized during our years in college. As a matter of fact, oftentimes we choose our plan of study, other types of things like that, as a way to make sure that we're in the right place we want to be on the pecking order, right? And then we get settled into it normally in adulthood. So how do we create a pecking order? We do it a lot of different ways. Our brains is one of the most common ways and one of the most obvious ways. School really reinforces this. The perception is if you're really smart, you get A's. If not as much, you might get B's or C's or on down the way, right? We use our athletic ability to determine pecking order, especially during school. Later, money becomes a way to determine pecking order. How we look, those things begin upending things like our athletic ability as we get a little bit older. Power is not even disguised. Power is just plain old pecking order. That's what it is. It's not even disguised as something else. Where we live, the house we own, how we mow our lawn, the car we drive, the clothes we wear, everything that we do in some way or another fits into this idea of the pecking order. And you think it doesn't. Let me give you an example. Have you ever let your lawn go? It's wet, it's dry, whatever the case may be, and you think, you know what, I'm not going to mow it today, I'm not going to mow it today. And then the neighbor on your right side mows their lawn, and the neighbor on the left side mows the lawn, and the neighbor across the street mows the lawn. What do you say to yourself? I need to get my lawn mowed. Why?
I hate my neighbor.
we actually voice something along that line. We actually say, I hope nobody mows today, right? Hope nobody else will mow today. Why? Because I don't want to have to get out and mow my lawn. Why? Because I will begin to stick out as the one who doesn't get things done in my neighborhood. I'll be falling behind. And that means that there's that risk of me sliding down on the pecking order in my neighborhood. Does that make sense? Pretty soon, I'm the guy with the rundown shack, and everybody's going, I wish that guy would move out. We could bulldoze his house, build something nice, and the property values in the neighborhood would move up. But that Keith, he's there, and he just runs everything down, right? So I'm afraid of letting my lawn get out of control. Now, of course, obviously, I'm using an extreme example. But the reality is all of those little minor things fit into pecking order, and whether we realize it or not, we play the game. Now, there are those who choose not to. I have an uncle. I have often chuckled over this. One of my dad's brothers, my birth father's brothers, who has chosen to live his life his terms. And he doesn't really care what other people say, right? When he wants some money, he'll go and do some billboards or something else for a while. He's got quite a bit of skill. He's able to do those types of things. When he doesn't want any money, he just won't, right? I'm not going to go to work. Why would I go to work? I have other things to do with my life. I'm not going to spend trading my time for money all day just so that people think better of me. I don't care, right? He's lived his life his terms, ridden his bike across the United States. He does long hikes. He goes for runs. He does a million different things. The one thing he doesn't do is routinely trade his time for money. He doesn't worry about what other people think, right? Well, I guess you can just ignore it all, right? You can live life on your terms. Many of us do, especially when it comes to we refocus our life so that we, how do I say this? Sometimes when we get into hobbies and crafts and football, whatever the case may be, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, just all the auxiliary things, we do it as a way to try to change our position in pecking order, right? Because maybe I'm not the smartest person in the world, but if I'm the very best person on bicycles anywhere around, for miles and miles around, everyone comes and asks me about bicycles. What's that do to me? For anybody who's interested in bicycles, I sit higher in the pecking order in their position, in their estimation, right? Now, I may know nothing about anything else in life, but if I know a lot about bicycles to those that are in that field, I seem like I'm pretty high in the pecking order. And so we begin, if we don't do well in the pecking order in some areas, oftentimes we begin to find another area and focus very intently on that one area so that we appear to be very knowledgeable, very amazing people, at least to that particular crowd of people that we're doing. Why? Because we've grown up in a system that reinforces that behavior. It's just the norm. It's what happens in society. It's happened since we were little kids. It happened to our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents and those before them. It's just how we do things. We call it keeping up with the Joneses, or other types of things like that. We minimize the area that we're not great at. We focus on the areas we can become good at, and we begin to try to figure out ways to manipulate how we stand in that picture. The pecking orders are flawed at best, of course, and can do great damage. In addition to killing the chicken on the bottom sometimes, let's take a look at this idea of school. The pecking order somehow based on how smart society thinks we are, which, by the way, at least in the early years, is the main determiner of pecking order, how smart we are, right? Eventually money begins to take over that, but so several kids in a classroom, they're reading a book, and each one takes turns reading. Some read well, others seem to struggle. It's overly simplistic to say that the kids who reads well are the smartest. Grades on a task such as reading are a simple fact of life, and we should understand that as a reflection of where the child is in the overall development of that skill. There's a difference there. Not how smart they are, but where they're at in the overall development of that skill. They should not be pictured as how smart a child is, but we do it. We do it all the time. You see the bumper stickers that say, I have an honor roll student at whatever, right? And then you have somebody else who says, my dog is smarter than your honor roll student. And then, you know what I mean? People constantly trying to, what are we doing? Well, we're poking fun at, but yet we're still addressing this idea of this social pecking order that we're all part of. But let's tear this apart for just a minute here. One kid could be older than another in a classroom. Let's just say, for instance, you had a 5-year-old and they can't answer questions as well as a 12-year-old. Does that mean the 5-year-old is stupid and the 12-year-old is smart? No. There's a huge age difference between the two, right? So you can't just say, well, the smarter one. No, because the smarter one, that doesn't work in age. Well, there's differences in developments, even of kids of the same age. One may develop slower, one may develop faster. There can be one parent who's able to spend a lot of time with their children focused on reading, and another parent who's not able to spend that time on that. That doesn't make the kids smarter or dumber. It just means that their reading skill is better or lower, okay? One kid may not hear as well as another or see as well as another. Hearing and seeing still are not reflections of how smart you are. One kid may not have gotten breakfast and they're hungry, or their parents are fighting, or something traumatic happened to them, all of which can cause a child not to do as well as another child. Still not an accurate reflection of how smart they are. It just is a reflection of how well they do on a particular skill at a given time. One kid could have a health issue, or attention issues, or other challenges such as dyslexia that would cause performance to suffer. Still not a reflection of how smart someone is. Some of the smartest people I know have dyslexia. Not a reflection of how smart they are. It's a reflection of how easy it is to read. One kid could have a shy personality and struggle to speak out, or be embarrassed about the clothes they have or the way they look. Still not an accurate reflection of how smart they are. One kid could have a native language or parents who that's different, or parents who speak two different languages in the home and create some confusion when they're trying to read as they're trying to figure out the right word in the language the school is using. One kid could learn in a different way than the teacher uses. One kid could be bored with what's happening in class, reading way ahead. There's a lot of variables. And teachers, if they're good teachers, recognize this. They recognize that grades are not necessarily a reflection of how smart a kid is. And yet, despite all of that, we take a simple thing like reading and other things, and we say, well, this kid gets Fs, that's not a very smart kid. This kid gets A's, that kid's really smart. And those things stick with us for all of our lives. I've met people who are, they're late high school. And, you start talking to them, well, what college are you thinking about going into? What are you going to do? Well, I don't know. I'm not very smart. Why? Because when they're in first grade, someone said, you don't know how to read, right? You can't keep up with all the other kids. You're not a very smart kid. And maybe their eyes just don't work that good. Maybe there's something else going on in their life, but they're told that and it sticks in their minds. And for all of their life, I'm not very smart. No, I think I'll probably just go get a job, but, who's hiring? Is there somebody offering minimum wage around here? No, I'm not going to go to trade school. No, I'm not going to go to college. I'm just going to fail anyway. Why? Because they preconceive. I'm not telling you this because it's Education Sabbath, and I want to talk to you about education reform. It's not the point. Instead, I'm telling you this to help you in your mind tear apart this idea of pecking order. I want you to tear it apart and rip it to shreds and throw it away. Giving any type of pecking order much deep thought, and you begin to realize how silly and fragile it really is. If you spend any time at all thinking about anything that we use to make a pecking order, you realize it's actually pointless. It doesn't mean anything. The kid that doesn't do as well as athletics could just be going through an awkward stage in their growth. Maybe they don't have a great hand-eye coordination, and maybe it's because they're wearing glasses, right? So let me give you an example. I grew up without glasses. When I was in high school, I played volleyball, and I played it very well. Our team did very well. We did, won little school competitions and all that type of thing. There was a group of 4 of us that always played, and we beat everybody, okay? I got a little older, got glasses, was over at somebody's house. We were playing a little bit of volleyball in the backyard. I thought, oh yeah, this is my sport, man. I can do well in this one. First ball comes at me, and I think, I got it. Boom, hits me right in the face. Why? My depth perception is entirely different with my glasses on. Something that I think I can see just fine changes entirely. I spent half the game, and the ball is hitting here, and the ball is hitting here, and the ball is hitting here, and the ball is hitting here. The ball is hitting everywhere except for my hands where it's supposed to hit. Why? Finally, I got smart. I took off my glasses, and guess what? I knew how to play volleyball again. Right? It doesn't mean I'm not good at volleyball or I'm great at volleyball. It means that I have barriers standing between me and doing well. Same thing with a kid who struggles in school. The same thing in so many different things, these silly things in which we determine that one person is here, one person is here. Wealth, that could be torn apart super easy. Some people go out of their way and they get deeply in debt to appear like they have a lot of money. Okay? I remember when my children were in academy. We had 2 children in academy. And we struggled to pay the bills. We struggled to make sure that those academy bills were paid. And so when I got my Christmas bonus from my work, we paid the December bill so my kids could take tests. When I got my profit sharing, my retirement that I was supposed to get from my work, that would come out and that would pay for the spring tests. And that's how we got our kids through academy. And I was talking with the treasurer one day, and I said, hey, I'm sorry. We don't make a lot of money. We're doing the best we can to try to make this a reality for our kids so that they can get a Christian education. I said, I will pay you, I was explaining it. He said, Keith, I never worry about you. I know that you will always pay me. You always come through on things. He said, let me tell you a secret. He said, right now in this school, we have just 2 or 3 families. I won't give you the exact numbers. We have just 2 or 3 families who are paying full tuition for their children in the school. Everyone else is receiving a reduced tuition. You have 2 out of that group you're paying full tuition for. He said, so I'm never worried about you. And I said to him, I said, well, that doesn't make sense because everybody else drives fancy cars. And everyone else has nice big houses. And everybody else has, why? And he says, I know, that's one of the most frustrating things to me. When people drive in a $100,000 car and they tell me they can't pay their kid's school bill. That's frustrating to me. Opened my eyes a little bit. Helped me realize some people are deeply in debt. They're doing everything they can to look like they have a lot of money. Others, my wife and I have been that pattern in the past, have chosen to live simply within our means. If we don't have money in the bank, we're not buying what we need, what we might think we need. Some choose to set vast amounts of money aside for the future. They're planning to, retire early, or they've got this going, or they've got that going, or maybe they're going to open a business. Others send money home to family members who are struggling, especially if they've come from another country. That doesn't mean they're poor, it just means a large amount of their money is going somewhere else. Some choose to live in big houses with no furniture. Something I learned fairly early on back when I worked in the bike shop industry. You'd go to somebody's house to set up a home gym. And here in this home, you'd walk in the front door and there's absolutely no furniture in that front room. And there's no furniture in that room. And there's no furniture in that room. And there's no furniture. And you begin to walk through the house and you begin to realize they have a kitchen table, a couple of chairs around it, a television, and a bedroom. That's what they have. And you think, well, how do people live that way? Turns out that they throw nice parties, and every time they have a party, they rent furniture for the party, and then it all goes home later on, okay? Or all goes back to its place later on. I didn't even realize that was a thing. It's a big, gorgeous, beautiful house with absolutely nothing in it. Are they rich? Depends on how you want to calculate that. You see how easily these social constructs can be torn apart? They're actually meaningless. They actually don't accomplish anything. Other people's have little tiny houses, and they've got amazing treasures tucked away in that little tiny house. Which one's richer? The person with the big house and nothing in it, or the person with the little house and lots of nice things in it? Warren Buffett's a classic example of this. Warren Buffett, at this point in time, is believed to be the 5th richest person in the world. He drives a 2014 car, built in 2014, and it's been through a hailstorm, so it's got dents and dings all over it. This man could go out and buy any car in the world that he'd like to buy. Literally, he could probably buy 5 of any car in the world he'd like to buy. You name some exotic car somewhere, he can buy that, pay cash for that. He drives an old 2014. It's got dents and dings all over it. Why? He doesn't care. It doesn't make any difference to him. He doesn't care what people think about his car. A lot of different ways to tear these things apart. I think you get it. None of these layers, the look of wealth or poverty, have any real reflection on how well-to-do a person is. But in real life, where the rubber meets the road, we use these things all the time to determine where we fit, how smart we are, how good we look. And we do it not only with other people, we put ourselves in a scale. It's reinforced by society around us, but we put ourselves in a scale. And we say, okay, here's where I'm at, and here, these people here, they're lower than me, these people here, they're higher than me. And it reflects in how we treat one another. And this is why it's important for us as Christians to think about this. It reflects on how we treat one another. I'm not going to read some of the text, but if you look carefully, Jesus taught some pretty specific things. Like, for instance, don't give preferential treatment to the rich, right? Make sure that you're being fair with those who are poor. We have a tendency to say, oh, well, this is a really important person, so I'm going to do this for them. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. We're going to, if they're coming to my house, we're going to spread out the best china. Is going to be the most amazing layout. Why? Because I want them to think that I'm somewhat near their category, right? Because I want them to tell their friends and neighbors that I'm someone amazing. Someone poor comes over to my house, what do? Oh, here's some paper plates and sandwiches, Hey, we had a good time. This was a nice party. Why? Well, because who are they going to tell? Who's going to believe them when they say, well, Keith, he doesn't have anything. Nobody's going to believe him. Nobody cares what their opinion is because society says so. Okay? I know this is an awkward conversation as a pastor to have, and yet it's important for us to think about in a church. We do exactly the same thing that chickens do, but we don't use our beaks to do it. We beat each other down with our words. We beat each other down with the way we treat them. We lift them up or push them down based on where we perceive they are in relationship to us. And you may think, well, I don't ever even think about that. You may not on the top of your mind, but in the back of your mind it runs almost constantly. That's why the Bible is so very clear on be thoughtful on how you treat the poor. Be thoughtful to take care of those around you. Because we have a tendency to want to put them aside, put them out of the picture. People who are embarrassment to us, people who are in middle school, this is what bullying is. They don't even hide it there, right? And by the way, that continues even into adulthood, of course. But that's what bullying is. They're trying their best to try to figure out who's higher on the pecking order. Trying to figure out who's more important. And quite frankly, as strange as it may sound, when bullying is happening, if you choose not to engage with it or stand back or say you shouldn't do that, then they think that you're lower on the pecking order. So if you want to be higher on the pecking order, you encourage the bullying. You encourage, as a matter of fact, you might even step in and do a little bit yourself, because that means you're a little higher, you're a little bigger, you're a little more important. It hurts people. It really hurts people long term. For all their life, it hurts people. The pecking order creates all kinds of damage for all of our lives. For those at the top, it creates a false sense of pride. We could spend a lot of time and look at all these texts on how God is opposed to the proud, God hates the proud, our pride is an abomination to him. There's a lot of different things we could think of. So if you perceive yourself near the top of the pecking order, be thoughtful. Why do you think that? Why do you feel like you're on the top of the pecking order? Be thoughtful about that. And then there's the bottom of the pecking order. For them, it creates shame, guilt, worthlessness feeling. Sometimes, even more extreme thoughts than that. And for those in the middle of the pecking order, it leaves them constantly, that's where most of us are, constantly striving to move one step up. That's why we want to make sure our lawn gets mowed. That's why we want to make sure our car looks decent. We may not be able to buy the nicest car, but at least our car is looking good. I was 39 years old, and I was, in my mind, capable. You want to wire the house? I can do that. You want to hang drywall? I can do that too. You want to replace the engine in your car? Sure, I'll help you. Sure. Plumbing? Yep, we can do that. Bike trip for teens? I'd love to do that. Caving? You bet. Let's go do that. Backpacking, canoeing, you name it. You want to do something active? You want to do something fun? You want to get some work done? Whatever it is, sign me up. I'll be part of that. And then came the day, and I'm not going to turn the focus away from this point, but the day came when I couldn't walk. There's a spiritual component to that. I'm not going to focus on that today. Talked about it before. Couldn't walk. Literally couldn't walk. I'm left laying face down in my house on the floor, unable to move. And it goes on. One day becomes two. I'm struggling, dealing with taking what medicines I can within reason to try to get myself moving again. End up eventually at my doctor, who sends me for x-rays, back to the doctor, out to a pain specialist. They're going to try to give me my lower back. It's not functional. Every time I try to even move, I'm laying on my stomach, and every time I try to even move, it's shooting pains to the point where you can't move, like your muscles lock. Pain specialist. Back to the family doctor. Pain specialist doesn't do any good. Out to a neurosurgeon. Out for more x-rays. Now more MRIs. Now back to the neurosurgeon. Oh yeah, you've got broken vertebrae. Yeah, you've got this. You're going to need surgery. We've got this going on, blah, 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 blah. During this time, the days march on. And it's a day. It's 2 days. It's 3 days. It's a week. It's 2 weeks. It's 3 weeks. Time goes on and I can't do anything. I can't do anything. I can't drive myself to work. Thankfully, I had a desk job. My wife was able to drive me to work. On the good days when everything was going good, I could use a cane. If I had a perfect day, I could use a cane and get from the car to my desk, that 27 steps that it took, hanging onto the cane going like this. And thinking, is this the rest of my life? And as these times went by, the people who used to call me and said, hey, could you come and help me, began to call me and say, hey, how can I help you? Right? Well, guess what that did to my self-esteem? Guess what that did to how I perceived where I stood on the pecking order? Began to move lower and lower and lower. And then, hey, we're going to have a backpacking trip. I'm sorry you can't come. We would love to have you. We'll show you some pictures of it later on. Hey, we're going to take a bike trip. I'm sorry you're not going to be able to be there. I missed out on all kinds of stuff that I would have normally been involved with and engaged with and loved. And instead, I'm laying on the floor. I can't even lay on my bed because it hurts so bad. I can't lay on my side. I can't lay on my other side. I can't lay on my back. I can lay on my face on the floor for hours and hours and hours and days and months. And this goes on and on and on. Off to physical therapy, off to this, off to that, back to another doctor, back to his pain specialist, over and over and over again. And these thoughts begin to run through my mind. I am worthless. There is nothing about me that's worth anything. I can't get anything done. Every single one of my skills are gone. Every single thing that I'm capable of, everything that I'm valuable for, it's all gone. I began to question, why am I still living? God, why don't you just let me die? Can't you just let me go? I don't want to spend the rest of my life this way. I'm a burden to my wife. She has to take care of, just to feed me food, just to bring it to me and help me get it in my mouth. Because my arm is locked up to the point that I can barely get it up there. I'm at work and I'm getting so little done because I'm standing at the desk doing this, trying to type on the computer. Because it's pinging constantly. And I begin to say, I really don't want to do this anymore. My children would be better off without me. My wife would be better off without me. They need to be able to get on with their life. They don't need the burden of me for all of their life. And then came the day where I talked to my wife earnestly and I said, here's where I'm at. I'm contemplating killing myself. And I know this is a dangerous place to be. And we need to talk. Because I don't think I have any value anymore to you or to anybody else. And it wasn't because of the way she treated me. It was because of the way I felt in my heart. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. Now there's a spiritual component to this in that this is the time that God reaches my heart finally for good. When I finally turn to Him. After all these years of battling with Him, when I finally turn to Him, it's these months where I don't have anything else to do. As a matter of fact, less than a week before this happened, I had been praying with God. I had spent a night in prayer. And I said, God, I'm tired of fighting with you over control over my life. I'm tired of trying to determine whether you're in control or whether I'm in control, who's really Lord of my life. I don't think I'm going to make it to heaven. And so if it's necessary for my salvation, take it away from me. Take control away so that I can't take it from you again. Less than a week later, I'm stuck laying face down on the floor in intense pain, barely able to move. And I spent months that way. I was mad at God. Mad like you wouldn't believe. You know, you've ever heard, be careful what you pray for, right? Mad like you wouldn't believe. With time, with a lot of pictures and charts and figuring out everything that was going on with me, began to understand that actually this injury that caused this had happened likely way back in my teen years based on the amount of damage around the injury. But from my teens until I was 39, God protected me from that, from the results of that injury. Why? Because I couldn't have handled it in my teens. It was only when I got to be 39 years old and sat down with God and had this discussion that said, I really want you more than I want anything else, that I was finally able to handle what was going to happen in my life, what was inevitable in my life. The news wasn't any more amazing. You know, my neurosurgeon said, eventually, no matter what happens, you will eventually end up in a wheelchair. We can hold it off for a few years, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30. If you're really careful, maybe 40. But you will end in a wheelchair. That's how your life ends. That's where this goes. And down continues the spiral. I'm worth nothing. I have no point. I have no value. If only there were a better way to determine what we're worth. If only somehow or another it wasn't based on how smart we were or how good we looked or what we'd accomplished or how athletic we were. If only somehow or another we could figure out a different way of determining what we're worth. Turn with me to 1 Samuel. This is our first text. There's only 2 today. 1 Samuel chapter 16. First Samuel chapter 16. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul?" Saul's the first king of Israel, who Samuel anointed. "How long will you grieve over Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go, and I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have selected a king for myself among his sons." Samuel said, "How can I go? When Saul hears of it, he'll kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. You'll invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I designate to you." And so Samuel did what the Lord said, and he came to Bethlehem, and the elders of the city came trembling to meet him and said, "Do you come in peace?" And he said, "In peace. I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourself. Come with me to the sacrifice." He also consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they entered, he looked at Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is before him." This is the guy. Look at him. This is the one God wants to be king. And the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or the height of his stature. I have rejected him. God does not see as man sees. For man looks at the heart and the outward appearance. Or man looks at the outward appearance, and the Lord looks at the heart." Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Next Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." And thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen these." Then Samuel said to Jesse, "Are these all the children?" I'm sure it was confusing. He thought, well, we've looked at them all. God, you said you were going to pick one, and you haven't. Is this all there is? And Jesse said, there yet remains the youngest, and behold, he's tending sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and bring him. We will not sit down until he comes here. He sent him and brought him in, and he was ruddy with beautiful eyes, handsome appearance. The Lord said, arise and anoint him, for this is he. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel arose and went to Ramah. Turns out God does have a different way of determining our value. God is really not actually interested in who gets the best grades in school. He's not interested in what your GPA is, how you did on your college placement exams. He doesn't care how fast you run, how fast you can climb rock walls. He doesn't care whether you're the best brick mason in the business. He doesn't care whether you're the most beautiful, taller than everyone else, the most handsome, whatever it is. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about your bank account, your houses, your cars. He doesn't care whether you're the best in the particular hobby or sport or activity that you've chosen. He could care less. It makes no difference to him. God has an entirely different way of measuring your worth. This is something I had to learn. This was a key part of my journey in recovering from that place and part of what put me here. I haven't talked in detail about it, but today's the day. I learned in that process that I am not valuable to God because for what I can do. I'm valuable to God for who I am. I'm not valuable because I can preach a good sermon. I am valuable to Him because I am His child. My most eloquent sermon, when presented before Him, I bring it to Him and I say, look at this sermon. Didn't I do an amazing job? And to Him, it's a lot like that 3-year-old who took a crayon and scribbled on a piece of paper. And there's a bunch of lines going back and forth. And He's like, wow, Keith, that's beautiful. I'm going to put it on the fridge. Right? He's not impressed by the most amazing sermon I ever preached. He's impressed because I'm His child. He loves the sermon that I preach because He's my Father. Luke chapter 12 is our only other second verse. Luke chapter 12. You can find this, by the way, in Matthew chapter 6 or 7, I believe, as well. Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 6. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 cents? And yet not one of them is forgotten by God. I think the Matthew's version says something along the lines of not one of them falls without your Father noticing. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are numbered. Do not fear, for you are more valuable than sparrows. There's other texts, we could look at so many of them, that talk about, hey, you're more valuable than sheep. You're more valuable than this. You're more valuable than that. We are of immense value to God. You are of immense value to God. He loves you with all of His heart. You are His creation. The crowning act of His creation. The very best, saved for last. He built us. You're His child. He redeemed you. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 23 repeats what's in 1 Corinthians 6 as well. You're bought with a price. Not only did He create you, not only are you His child,
But he paid this immense price for it. The death of his very son. Shed his blood for you. That makes you very, very, very valuable. More valuable than if you have the most amazing car and the biggest bank account and the biggest brain and the fastest legs. More valuable than if you're the best of everything. More valuable than that. More valuable than if everybody thinks, Keith, he's at the top. More valuable than that. You're valuable because he loves you. For all of eternity, God will remember you or know you for all of eternity. He'll know you if you choose to follow him and be in his kingdom. For all of eternity, you will walk and talk with him. He's built you for that purpose. That's why you are who you are. He wants to walk and talk with you. But for all eternity, there'll be a hole in his heart because he will remember those who did not choose, because he also designed them for his companionship, to pour out his love upon. That's why this Great Commission is so important. That's why sharing the good news of God is so important. Because most, even around us, they don't understand. They don't know who God is. They don't know that God loves them that much. They don't know that they are so valuable to him. God wants to spend all of eternity with you. That's why he created you. That's your purpose. That's your value. Because he put his love upon you.